great ways to check on the seal's mobility. They want to make sure that the seal's muscles are working properly and they're not showing any signs of discomfort when they're moving around. Plus, it's a good form of exercise as well. You might also see them ask the seal to open its mouth, and that way they're able to get a good look at all of those teeth in there. And if they needed to, they could even brush the seal's teeth during a session like this one. Now you might be wondering how our seals learn all of these amazing behaviors. I know it seems a little bit complicated, but our zookeepers will break the training process down into 3 steps to make it a little simpler. And we call those steps the 3 R's: the request, response, and reward. So let's start by talking about that first R, the request. The zookeepers will first request a behavior from the seal. So they're going to ask it to do something. They might use their voice or their hands to make that request, or they can use a target pole, which is that long sticky stick with the ball on the end. It's just one more way of communicating with the seal. Now after that request comes the response, and when the seal responds correctly and they do that behavior right, they will hear a whistle. That whistle lets them know that they did the behavior correctly, and their reward, that third R, is on the way. Now their reward today is a food reward, my favorite kind of reward. And what do you guys think they are getting as their food reward? Can you shout it out? Fish! Yes, absolutely. You guys were listening earlier. I love it. Yeah, they will get some fish when they do the behavior correctly. Now let's say for a moment that the seal doesn't do the behavior correctly. Maybe they make a mistake. Maybe they just don't want to participate in training. That's okay. Nothing is going to happen if the seal doesn't do the behavior right, or if they don't do it at all. The zookeepers will usually ask them one more time, give them another chance to get it right, or they'll just move on to something else that the seal does remember or does want to do. Now, training sessions like this help our seals adapt to life here at Lincoln Park Zoo. But seals in the wild need our help to adapt to the threats of a changing climate.
Oh, look at
when
that.
we burn fossil fuels like coal and oil for things like energy and transportation, we release rampant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And this carbon dioxide builds up and acts like a thick blanket that traps heat around the world and disrupts the climate. Now, one of the ways that it's disrupting the climate is by warming ocean waters. And this affects seals because they are adapted for life in cold ocean waters. In fact, they have a few adaptations for cold waters that you can see by watching our seals today. One adaptation is that nice thick layer of blubber or fat. That blubber is what gives them a little bit of a jiggle when they're moving around on the rocks, but it also acts like a wetsuit. It keeps seals nice and insulated when they're out in those northern coastal waters. Now, seals also have nails on their flippers, and that is actually a cold water adaptation as well. In their native habitat, they will use those sharp nails to scrape a hole into the ice when it freezes over, and that way they can come up for a breath of air, because they breathe air just like we do. Now, those warming ocean waters are affecting seals not just because of their cold water adaptations, it's also affecting that food web. So if you guys remember way back at the beginning of the training session, we talked about that food web. It begins with that teeny tiny plant called phytoplankton, which is eaten by fish, which are eaten by seals, which are eaten by other animals like killer whales and sharks. However, phytoplankton does not grow as well in warmer ocean waters. In fact, the amount of phytoplankton in the ocean has decreased by 50% over the last 50 years. It has decreased by half, which of course means less food for the fish, less food for the seals, and so on and so forth. So imagine going to the grocery store and finding out that half of the food that's normally there has disappeared. That would be a little bit of a problem, wouldn't it? Now, the seals are not alone when it comes to the threats of a changing climate. Our food web could be affected as well. About 90% of the land here in the Midwest is used for agriculture or for farming. However, if the climate continues to change, that's going to affect both the kinds of foods that we can grow here and how well they grow due to extreme weather events like storms and droughts. Now, this shared threat to both our food web and the seal's food web is a great reminder to me that all living things are connected and so we have a shared fate. And this is why it is really important for us to work together today to protect the environment and keep it healthy for future generations. Now, the good news is that there are definitely ways that we can do that. One of the best ways to reduce your energy consumption and help fight climate change is to take public transportation.